Paganism is on the rise in our culture. Can you feel it? It's not uncommon. This isn't the first time in history that paganism has had some kind of a resurrection or revival. And the reason that happens in history is usually because there's a group or a collection of people who want to get rid of Christianity. Christianity is so deeply rooted in our culture that you can't just get rid of it, you have to replace it. So, what existed before Christianity? Well, it was paganism. So that's what people do to get rid of Christianity. They replace it with paganism. Now, when we resurrect paganism, especially when we do it specifically to uproot Christianity, you don't end up with any sort of noble paganism or paganism as the Greeks and the Romans had it. You end up with something much worse. And there's a historical reason for that. Christianity enters into the scene in the first century, and it grows and it comes to power. And a lot of people think mainstream history will tell you that Christians came to power and they just did this blanket condemnation of paganism. They came in contact with the culture around them and they just said, everything is bad, get rid of it, and replace it with Christianity. But that's not what the early Christians did. The Christians kind of saw it as their vocation, their role as baptizers of the culture. What I mean by that metaphorically is that they would come in contact with the culture, either a religion or a philosophy, and they would absorb the aspects of the culture that were good or true or beautiful or in some way consistent with the gospel. Of course, there were elements of the culture that they encountered that they rejected, elements that were sinful or evil or false. But a lot they absorbed. This is why in Catholic culture, Catholic morality takes a lot from Stoicism and from Aristotle and from Plato. There's a vibrant art and poetic tradition in the Catholic Church that is taken from artists and poets from Greece and Rome. Think about Dante's Divine Comedy, for example, which is very much in the tradition of Virgil and Homer. There's a scripture verse, I think, that really expresses this attitude of early Christians very well. It comes from St. Paul's letter to the Philippians. It's chapter 4, verse 8. And he says, finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is gracious, if there is any excellence, and if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. So here you see St. Paul saying, reflect, think about anything that is true or good and beautiful. He's not just talking about the scriptures there, he's opening it up to the culture or whatever the Christians may be encountering. If you find something that is good, it's worthy of reflection. So this was how the early Christians saw themselves. They were baptizers of the culture that they encountered, absorbing what is good and wholesome and worthwhile, and then rejecting the things that are not. That's really important, and that has implications for our culture today. Because today, when people strive to resurrect paganism as a way of getting rid of Christianity, they don't end up with the paganism that the Romans and the Greeks or whatever culture had. They end up with a paganism that has been filtered, a paganism that has had all the goodness, the truth, and the beauty filtered out of it. It's a base form of paganism. It's an ugly form of paganism. It's a form of paganism that looks a lot like the opening ceremony for the Olympics. That is the perfect manifestation of what we're talking about. We've heard a lot of Catholics comment on it. We've heard people speak out about how it was sacrilegious, which is probably the worst part of the ceremony. It was an offense toward God. We've also heard people speak out about how it's offensive to Christians in the sense that it takes a very important aspect of our faith and makes a mockery of it. Absolutely, and those are probably the two most important points to bring up. But I would also just add that even as a pagan celebration, it was straight up ugly. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't uplifting, it wasn't a beautiful addition to Western civilization and Western culture. It just kind of looked sad and devoid of goodness, truth, and beauty, as we're saying. It looked like paganism with goodness, truth, and beauty filtered out of it. I think this is just a moment, a time for our culture to reflect and to just look at ourselves and ask ourselves, maybe we should be raising our standards for what we consider to be culturally good and true and beautiful. Maybe we need to raise our standards for what is considered to be noble in our culture and our society, what is truly enriching. I hope maybe we can, people of all faiths really, not just Christians, but anyone can look at the ceremony, look at our culture, and just say, let's do better. Let's do better. God bless.